Hello fellow gamers, I'm Christopher Chrisman of Retro Game Network, and coming up next, a look at last week's retro video game news on the RGN Files for the week ending Saturday, June 1st, 2019. In the RGN Files this week, Konami has officially announced the complete game list that will be included on their upcoming Contra Anniversary collection. The compilation is being created in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Konami as a company. Other such franchises by the company that have gotten similar treatment include the recently released Castlevania and Classic Arcade collections. When Konami first made the announcement of the collection, they initially stated that the arcade versions of Contra and Super Contra, alongside of Super C on the NES and Contra 3 The Alien Wars on the Super NES, would also be included in the set. In their latest press release, they stated the remaining games that would be made available, which are as follows: the NES and Famicom versions of the original game, Super Nintendo Super Probotector, the Genesis Hard Corps title, Probotector on the Sega Mega Drive, and Operation C for the Nintendo Game Boy. In addition to these 10 games being a part of the collection, an additional 6 Japanese variants are also going to be included in the set as a free update after the game is published. These variants include the arcade version of the original title, Super Contra Alien no Gyokoshu, Super Contra, Contra Spirits, Operation C, and the Hard Corps. The Contra Anniversary Collection also comes with a digital bonus book of extras, providing a look into the history of the franchise and its significance in the video game community. The game is slated to be released by the end of the summer for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and on PCs running Steam. The set is planned to be released as a digital-only purchase with no physical edition planned, and will sell for just under $20. Independent video game publisher Iodine Dynamics has released the final version of their NES homebrew title, What Remains. Being in the works since April of 2016, What Remains is a visual novel that incorporates a variety of adventure elements into the mix. It's 1986, and you have just gotten home from a recent skating session when a video game cartridge falls into your hands. You're excited to find out what is on the game as you go to your friend's house who had recently received an NES console as a present. However, once you insert the game into the system, a strange list of encrypted files appears on the screen. The storyline translations actual events that happened during the 1980s decade, and it is ultimately turning these same events into a quest to help you save the world, or at the very least your hometown of the fictional Sunny Peaks. What Remains have been shown off throughout the European Union and the UK over the past few years, being demonstrated at several conventions and exhibits. A recent tweet by the company stated that version 1.0 has been completed, indicating that the game is now officially finalized. The free or voluntary donation ROM image can be played using your favorite 8-bit Nintendo emulator, as well as on original hardware using the means of a flash card. In addition, Iodine Dynamics is accepting pre-orders for an upcoming physical release. The physical version will include the cartridge and box and will be compatible with all Reasons. It should be noted, however, that the company will be recycling original cartridge shells and circuit boards to create these editions, meaning that some original NES cartridges will be sacrificed for these creations. A total of 80 physical games are planned to be created and will sell for just under $90. Previously on the RGN Files, Limited Run Games has begun accepting pre-orders for the physical release of the Dragon's Lair trilogy for the Nintendo Switch platform. This compilation was originally released for the Nintendo Wii back in 2010 and was later officially ported to the PlayStation 3 in 2013 and the PlayStation 4 the following year, with the PlayStation versions being previously released as digital releases only. The collection consists of 3 ports of the full-motion animated video games of the 80s and 90s, Dragon's Lair, Dragon's Lair 2 Time Warp, and Space Ace. Limited Run Games had previously published a physical disc version of the trilogy last October, and it had been reported after the release that a Switch version was in the works. Just like the PlayStation 4 version from last year, Limited Run is offering the collection in a standard edition, which will include the game on cartridge media in a traditional-style Nintendo Switch game case. A collector's edition was also made available upon its original pre-order window, which will include the game on a 12-inch Laserdisc-style box, which is individually numbered, and plays homage to the Laserdisc technology that the original arcade cabinetry utilized. You will also be given the option of 3 lithographs, as well as a poster and papercraft model of the cabinetry. However, this version has sold out within the first 24 hours of the set being made available for purchase last week. The standard edition of the collection began its pre-order window from Limited Run Games on May 24th, and will continue taking orders until this coming June 7th. The cost of the standard physical edition of the Dragon's Lair trilogy for the Nintendo Switch platform is just under $35, and the shipments of the games are planned to begin sometime in late September. A set of 2 new Atari Jaguar ports of retro computer games has been announced for physical release via Atari Age. The first of the games, Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe, was originally released for the Atari ST back in 1990 and was later ported to other systems such as the Commodore Amiga, C64, and Sega-based home consoles. It is based on the futuristic cyberpunk sports genre, combining ice hockey and handball, and getting rewarded by your violent actions. This will also be Atari Age's largest game to be released for the Jaguar, clocking in at a total of 6 megabytes. In addition, Fantasy World Dizzy, first released by the Oliver twins and Codemasters in 1989, is also getting the port treatment. Being developed at the time as the first game of the franchise, the game would receive official ports for DOS-based computers, the Commodore 64, and Atari ST platforms, among others, with an NES port being developed in the 1990s, which eventually got released in 2017. In this game, you need to rescue your girlfriend from the evil king and his trolls. Being a pair of anthropomorphic eggs, you must be careful around the water and avoid being cooked alive in a fire. Both of the games will be getting the physical release thanks to Atari Age, and in all cases will include the cartridge, box, and manual. Both games offer your choice of a standard gray cartridge shell or a clear or colored shell for an additional cost. Speedball 2 sells for $70 with the gray shell or $75 for an alternate color, with no limit of the number of games being produced. Meanwhile, Fantasy World Dizzy sells for $60 for a standard gray shell or $65 for an alternate one, and will be limited in production to only 250 titles in total. Both games are scheduled for shipment sometime next month. And finally, this week, a personal viewpoint on one of this week's featured stories with our Wimho, well, in my humble opinion, commentary. Earlier this week, Retro Game Network had reported on the story of Iodine Dynamics and their new NES video game, What Remains. The hard work and dedication that it takes to create original homebrew games for the systems of yesterday have always been a fascination to me, for in recent years, gamers of a variety of consoles of yesterday have had plenty of brand new titles to play on our favorite systems. What makes this even better for myself, alongside of other similar gamers, is that the title is also getting prepared for a physical release. There's just nothing quite like playing a video game from the 80s using original hardware on a CRT with a brand new cartridge in your hand. But in this particular case, it is not going to be a brand new cartridge. The fine folks behind the game at Iodine Dynamics have announced recently that the physical version is going to be created by means of recycling video game boards as well as outer plastic shells, as opposed to making brand new cartridges. What this means is that original games from the NES's original lifespan are actually going to be dismantled in order to create the new games. Shells will be taken apart, the ROM chip that holds the original title will be removed, and then replaced with the ROM chip of the new game. And then after that, the shell will then be put back together again. Slap on a new label, and there you have it, a new game in retro pieces, direct from the 1980s. The process has already brought up enough controversy in the form that the company had added an answer to their official FAQ, where they discussed the reasoning behind their decision to do the distribution in this manner. Their response was as follows, quote, "Producing new hardware and purchasing new electronic components to create a game did not feel right, because in the long run, we would just be adding to the already out-of-control pile of e-waste. There are so many cartridges out there which are abandoned and unloved. They can be brought back to life with a new ROM, bringing them a new purpose with very little environmental impact." End quote. Which brings us now to this week's Wimho question. Is there ever a time in which it is acceptable to repurpose original video game cartridge media of the past as a method of creating something brand new for the same system? Well, in my humble opinion, the answer to that question is a very strong and passionate no. This is one of those situations where I understand the desire to create physical media, and while I do understand this, there are simply so many other methods that could have been chosen to produce the physical product. There's nothing quite like being able to play a brand new game for your favorite system of your youth, and being able to do it in the same manner that you did when you were a kid. However, the problem that I have with the recycling of original cartridges is their finite number. Now, the people at Iodine Dynamics have not made it public exactly which games they are compromising for their product. However, I think that many of us would be safe to assume that they are destroying copies of the Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt combination cartridge. It is without a doubt one of the most well-known, and thanks to its inclusion as a pack-in with the original NES for several years, it is also one of the most plentiful in existence. You can visit any retro video game store and literally find over a dozen copies at any given time. So it would make sense if these are in fact the game titles that are being modified for modern use. But here's the problem. Remember that word that I used earlier? Thin it? The issue is this. If other companies begin to start doing this same practice, eventually there will be a shortage of this combination cartridge. Now, I'm not trying to say that a game that has literally tens of millions of physical copies is going to be going the way of the dodo bird anytime soon. The point, however, is that the more people that destroy older games to create new ones, the lesser and lesser copies of the original will exist. However, more importantly, the gaming community wouldn't even realize it. Wouldn't it be interesting if 100 years from now, there were more copies of a game such as Action 52 or DuckTales 2 in existence when compared to Mario 1 and Duck Hunt? However, it goes on even further than this. Here we are in the year 2019 with all kinds of technology available at our fingertips. And if it isn't physically available at any present moment, it can certainly be there with a quick button press or a phone call. Yes, I'm talking about online shopping. One such piece of technology is the ability to create video game cartridges for nearly any retro video game console. Between making actual negative molds for the plastic shells or using 3D printers, there are so many alternate methods that can be used to create physical video game cartridges that even considering dismantling original games from the console's original lifespan is, as far as I am concerned, unacceptable. Not to mention that with the number of items that use PCBs these days, there will not be a shortage of such boards at any time in the near future. Best of all, if a video game developer actually wanted to create physical product, there are also plenty of companies out there that will handle the sales, creation, and distribution for them. Plus, these reputable companies will never compromise original games. My personal viewpoint is that if independent video game programmers and developers are going to take the time to make fresh games for the fans to play and enjoy, taking the time to ensure that physical product, if decided to create such items, is done with the same quality and care as the actual programming and development. The fact that those at Iodine Dynamics are hiding behind such statements like environmental impact and out-of-control piles of e-waste, to be perfectly frank, I feel that these excuses are out of pure laziness. It's actually very logical. The cartridges that are being repurposed are presently not causing any environmental harm. If they were, they would not be available for recycling after all. Here we have a situation where original stock is being destroyed, when in reality you don't really need many things to actually create original physical games. Several years ago, there was a YouTuber named Rinri that created an NES cartridge shell using, of all things, popsicle sticks. And to be frank, it actually worked very well. Now, I'm not trying to say that these indie developers need to resort to using wood to create their physical product, but if anything else, it does show that video game cartridge shells don't always have to be plastic. It actually could make it possible for the developers to actually get creative with their final physical product. The point that I'm trying to make here is that with the number of methods and materials that can be used to create brand new video game physical media, the act of compromising and destroying original games from 30 years ago, to me, is just flat out barbaric and ridiculous. If these types of activities continue, who knows what games will be bountiful and plentiful as the decades continue. Maybe someday, if this trend keeps up, there will be a day where there are very few Super Mario and Duck Hunt cartridges in existence, and we would then have to rely on digital preservation as well as online downloads to keep their spirit alive. But with the fact that in this case it's from Nintendo, well, that's a story for yet another day. And that is my humble opinion. That's it for this week's edition of the RGN Files. For those listening on VGM on FM, please stay tuned. There'll be more music coming up shortly. For complete details of any of this week's stories, visit RetroGameNetwork.com. And don't forget to check us out on our social media outlets on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Retro Game Network, and on Twitter and Twitch at RetroGameNet. For the RGN Files, I'm Christopher Chrisman. This week's news stories provided by the following: Atari Age, IGN, Indie Retro News, Limited Run Games, Nintendo Life, Retro Magazine, /Gear. The opinions expressed on our Wimho commentary segment are not necessarily those of other RGN affiliates or contributors or of Atlantic Cape Community College.